Hi, I'm James Rowles. I'm the Chief Strategist for the team, and I'm here to answer some of your questions about the Chinese Grand Prix. Wow, what an incredible race. You would have seen so much action really start to finish, and hopefully you enjoyed it. What we saw, that race, both Ferraris qualified first and second. Valtteri did an exceptional maneuver on Kimi and was able to steal that P2 slot from him. Lewis, nowhere near as fortunate, was lucky, dropping back to P5 in the melee in the midfield. What then happened from that point onwards is you saw a mixture of tyre compounds in the first stint of the race performing slightly differently. You had the Red Bulls on the ultra soft versus Lewis and Valtteri, and both Ferraris on the soft tyre. As we got towards that first stop window, you would have seen Valtteri go for the undercuts, and an incredible pit stop by our team and an incredible outlap by Valtteri as well meant he was able to wrestle the lead from Sebastian. As we went into the second stint of the race, with where Lewis was behind, we managed to get him again an undercut against Kimi and holding off both Red Bulls. He still ended up behind Verstappen, but he was able to defend against Ricciardo, who tried the undercut. As we went through the race, both Toro Rossos then hit each other, bringing out the safety car. Neither Sebastian nor Valtteri were able to stop. They were past the safety car line. In the case of both Red Bulls, they took an option to come in and fit fresh soft tyres. And from that point onwards, you had a race between cars on that medium tyre against Red Bull on that new soft. The fight was extraordinary. They were able to fight their way back up through the field, and you would have seen huge amounts of action as Verstappen came alongside Lewis in the high-speed corner and then got knocked out. We then see situations against Vettel where he was trying to go up the inside into turn 14 and again resulting in an accident. And Ricciardo eventually fighting his way through the field, making his way into the lead of the race, Valtteri unable to hold him back, allowing Ricciardo to take the win, followed by Valtteri with Kimi just behind him. Hi Chan, really good question, and it mirrors a lot of the analysis that we did ourselves internally. We would agree, Friday the car looked good in the hunt for pole position and the race win, really, based on the Friday performance. Saturday, the track cooled down. So Friday around 20 degrees, Saturday was around 15 degrees. And that's a small drop really in the grand scheme of things, but for us on the tyres, that makes a very significant difference. As we went into Sunday, the track went up to 40 degrees. And these are very big orders of magnitude shift in how the tyres work and behave. The other change that happened, Friday was very windy, very blustery, but it was a headwind on the back straight down into turn 14. That's the long straight into the tight right-hand hairpin. On Saturday, that had turned into a tailwind into turn 14. And it changes the dynamic of how the car behaves in there under braking and under corner entry phase. So you put those two things together and you've got two very different sets of circumstances you're dealing with between Friday and Saturday, and then again Saturday to Sunday. Siddharth on Facebook, thank you for your question. And it's an extremely good question, one that we are going through in detail here. So if we wind back a few and have a look at some of the races. Melbourne, we were able to get the car working on the tyres, qualifying 3. We set a time that was extremely fast with Lewis. If we go forward to Bahrain, the medium tyre looked to work very well on our car, and the degradation on the super soft looked to work well as well. So there's little vignettes of information where we've been able to get it to work. And again, if we go to the Chinese Grand Prix, in qualifying 2, we ran the soft tyre. We did a 31.9 with Lewis, and that would have put us in contention for 5th place on the grid on a soft tyre. So you get this evidence of the tyres working. And conversely, the same for Ferrari. In Melbourne, they weren't quite there. On the super soft in Bahrain, they were just outside the range and degrading too much. And on the medium, a little bit slower than us. So it's a window that all teams have to try and operate with. And you're correct in your reasoning. It looked like Ferrari in the cold conditions and in the very warm conditions were faster than us. And there's several effects going on here. The way the tyres work is they're very sensitive to temperature on the front and on the rear. And you need all 4 tyres working roughly in the right temperature at every single corner around the track. And some corners, when they're tight and twisty, you generate a lot of temperature. Other corners, like the back end of the straight into turn 14, you cool the tyres right down. And you need a car that is able to work the tyres in a consistent manner. And all teams are working their hardest to try and achieve that. But as you can imagine, it's difficult to get it all coming together at once. Then there's the second question. Ferrari and Red Bull are fierce opponents. They're world champions. They're developing the car and they're working day and night tirelessly to beat us. We're doing the same, but it's an arms race of who can develop the car the fastest and who can produce the fastest car. And what we can't ignore at this point in time is in Shanghai, Ferrari had a faster car than us, and it is our duty and job to keep working tirelessly to go through to Baku and do our best to fight back against them. Hi, Manish on Twitter. Thank you very, very much for that question. And to answer it simply, yes, I think the tyres this year are having an impact. But more so than that, there's a second aspect as well, which is you've got three teams, Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull, that all, depending on what tyre it is and what track it is, are able to have different levels of performance to each other. In the case of Melbourne, we were very fast on both compounds. In the case of Bahrain, Ferrari were very fast on that super soft tyre, but had more degradation. And in the case of the Chinese Grand Prix, Red Bull were extraordinarily fast on that soft tyre. And what that's creating is different cars with different levels of performance, depending on what the track temperature is, what the conditions are, and what tyre they have fitted to the car. The second is that Pirelli have provided compounds that provide multiple different strategy options on the table. In the case of Bahrain, you saw us go for that one stop. Ferrari were on the two, but they managed to hold on at the end of the race in the soft. In the case of the Chinese Grand Prix, you saw Red Bull come through that field using the safety car to the best avail, fitting the soft tyres. And in Melbourne, you saw the field really using the one stop because there weren't many other tactical options. But what we have this year is more overtaking and more difference. And ultimately, it's creating racing all the time and enough for us to think about all the way through the race. Hi Israel, thank you very much for your question via Twitter. So let's go through that undercut with Valtteri. We were 3.3 seconds behind Sebastian before we came into the pit lane in order to execute the undercut. And a few things came towards us perfectly all together at the same time. The first was that our pit stop was incredible. In this new era, we did a 1.83 second time based on our traffic light system. That's very quick. That's since Austin 2016 with the smaller wheels and tyres, we haven't done times around that. And Sebastian's stop was slower. It was around about 9/10 slower if you measure across the pit lane time, and their pit stop was around about 7/10 of that. So already straight away, you've eaten into his margin. Valtteri's outlap was extraordinary. We have a number of messages we gave to Valtteri to make sure he knew what he needed to do, and it was like a qualifying lap. He executed it perfectly, he didn't make any mistakes. So that then contributed to a couple of seconds gain. The final element is on the in-lap. You can see Sebastian just really struggling on those old soft tyres. They were still in a good state, they weren't completely gone, but they were degraded, and you can see a few tenths lost from him on the way in as well. And all of that came together beautifully to allow Valtteri to come out around about 7/10 ahead of Sebastian as they exited the pit lane together. So it was an undercut, it was a pit stop coming together at the same time, and a fantastic outlap from Valtteri. To Vineet on Instagram, in answer to your question, fundamentally yes, it was going as well as we could have hoped it to. The undercut was successful, Valtteri was just simply managing the position. You saw that Ferrari had Kimi out in front, and Valtteri had to do an exceptional maneuver around the outside of turn 2 in order to get ahead of him. So that's the point in which the plan was potential to failure, simply because that allowed Sebastian to close back up behind. But we were confident that the medium tyre from that point would make it to the end of the race. Sebastian was behind us, the Red Bulls or anyone else, in order to do a standard two-stop strategy and stop again, would have lost over 20 seconds of race time. So it was within our control to just manage it to the end. Hi Christian, and thank you for your question via Facebook. Valtteri had just crossed what's called the safety car 1 line. So just to explain that, there are two very important lines on track around the pit lane. One's called the safety car 1 line, and that's where the pit entry is located. And the other one is called the safety car 2 line. That's where the pit exit is located and where the two streams of traffic, those on track and those exiting from the pit lane, merge together at the same time. Valtteri was around 10 meters ahead of that safety car 1 line. And the significance of that means that he couldn't get into the pit lane. You physically passed the last point on track where you can actually cross into the pit lane entry. And the reality behind that was it meant that he had no other option but to continue around on the start-finish straight and catch the safety car as it exited the pit lane. Hi Chris, and thank you for your question via Twitter. And the question was, with Lewis, did we have time to bring him in on the safety car? And the simple and short answer is yes, we absolutely did. In fact, more so proven behind the fact that Verstappen was just ahead and Ricciardo just behind, and both of those cars made it into the pit lane. So the question is, why didn't we do it? The situation across the race to that point was that cars weren't really overtaking, even when there was a difference in compound between them. On stint 1 of the race, you had a mixture of cars on soft and medium. No one was overtaking each other. We had, for us, Kimi in front on the soft tyre, no difference between the two cars. We couldn't even get close. Same with Valtteri at front with Vettel. But those obviously are the same tyres. Verstappen was on that ultra soft tyre, a tyre that was very sensitive and very difficult. And neither Kimi nor Lewis could really make any inroads into him whatsoever at all. So on a track like that, the performance difference between compounds wasn't working out. More so with Lewis, if under that safety car condition, we always review how many positions we could potentially gain and how many positions we may lose. So first of all, what would we have gained? Verstappen ahead, we knew there was a chance that they would come into that safety car. And if that were to happen, it would put Lewis back up into a podium position if we can take that medium to the end of the race and defend against those cars behind us. Now, the medium on our car was working very, very well. And indeed, we knew that you could do 40 laps in it, which is what you saw at the end of the race with Valtteri. That tyre was working still at the end of the race. So the first question is a 10-lap-old medium going to suffer? The next question is, how many positions are we going to lose behind us? We knew Ricciardo was in our window, so if he didn't stop, we would drop behind him. But furthermore, we had Kimi. Kimi stayed up very, very long, and he was back into what we call the safety car window for Lewis, which would have meant it would be very, very marginal if Lewis was going to come out or behind Kimi. Now, what you saw happen is both Red Bulls took that opportunity. And in fact, Ricciardo did end up behind Kimi, Verstappen ended up ahead. And with Lewis, we also knew if we stopped under the safety car, we would always be behind Verstappen. So whatever happens, we'd be behind Verstappen going through the race from then onwards. And it was a decision that when we laid out all the facts on the table, we didn't believe, based on the earlier evidence, that there would be enough performance differential for a soft to overtake a medium, even one that's 10 laps old. The reality behind the situation is everyone saw what happened. Both Red Bulls were extraordinarily quick on that tyre and were able to just side through the field, making their way up to the front. Ben, thanks for your tweet. Really good question. We have simulations running in the background, but what they're doing is they're looking 1 to 2 laps ahead. So you don't have to run simulations instantaneously when the safety car is deployed. You rely on simulations that were running 60 seconds ago or 2 minutes ago to allow you to understand what are the pros and cons. And there is a human who makes a decision at the end of it. And the reality behind that is the computer simulations are a system that allow us to try and make as informed decisions as we can do, but ultimately we rely on our knowledge, our experience, supplemented by the computer systems in order to make the best decision possible. Hi RMB44, thank you for your question via Twitter. The car itself, we're confident, is faster than the 2017 car. You've seen evidence already of that across multiple other tracks, Melbourne being a good example of that, Barcelona winter testing being another example of that. But what you're seeing is a shift in environmental factors for a track. So as you go to one track and it becomes windy or not windy or cold or hot, you could see up to a second swing in lap times because of all of those environmental factors. And in Shanghai, in conditions that were 15 degrees, which is really colder than we would ever normally run in, even colder than what we experience in a cold Barcelona morning, you're seeing that the car's not quite working in those conditions. And that's why the lap time mirrored the lap time of last year. Thank you so much for sending in all of your questions. And actually, we really enjoy sharing some of the insight inside with you and hope you understand a little bit more about just some of what goes on behind the scenes of the Formula One team. We very much look forward to some of your questions for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Please send them in and we'll do our best to answer them. Thank you.